I'm Cheyenne Daniels, race and politics reporter for The Hill, and welcome to our event this evening called All In, Building a Diverse, Equitable, and Inclusive Energy Workforce. I want to give a special thank you to our sponsor for this evening, Southern Company, for helping support this discussion tonight. So thank you so much, Southern Company. As the United States prepares for the energy transition, a renewed focus has now been placed on workforce diversity in the energy industry. The energy sector itself is booming with millions, possibly even billions, in new investments and job growth opportunities, but Black and Latino workers remain underrepresented in clean energy versus the rest of the economy, according to a new report by the Department of Energy. Black workers make up only about 9% of the clean energy workforce, despite making up 13% of the nation's workforce. And women represent less than 30% of the sector's workforce, despite accounting for nearly half of the overall US labor workforce. It doesn't stop there, because now we got to talk about these young people, those whippersnappers out there. So the energy workforce itself is trending younger, but turnover is highest among those who are 23 to 37 years old, according to the Center for Energy Workforce Development. So these are a lot of numbers, I know, but the bigger questions that we have right now are, what can companies in the energy sector do to focus on inclusion and retention of younger employees, women, and underrepresented ethnic and minority groups? What role should the government play in enacting policy solutions to build more equitable workplaces? And how can our community stay engaged and participate in these efforts? So these are all the topics that I am so excited we're going to be able to cover this evening. But before we get underway, I do want to give just a few quick housekeeping notes. Please keep your phones on silent during the entire program, but please feel free to join in the conversation on social media. You can follow us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, and social media, including Instagram, at The Hill Events, using the hashtag TheHillDEI. That's all my housekeeping notes. But I am so excited now to welcome Joe Ruffalo, The Hill's SVP and General Manager, to the stage for a conversation with our sponsor, Southern Company. He will be speaking with Chris Womack, Southern Company President. Welcome, Joe and Chris.
Well, thank you so much for being here. It's great to meet you.
It's my pleasure.
Let's just jump right in. Is the energy...
Well, first of all, let me say
Please.
Thanks to Congressman Clyburn, my dear friend.
Absolutely.
It's having the opportunity to be in his midst and his presence is always an honor, except for when I'm on the golf course with him. That is not necessarily an honor. It's a whipping.
Well, it's great to have you all here and appreciate your time. Let's just jump right in. Is the energy sector's workforce as diverse as it can be?
I don't think there's any workforce that is as diverse as it can be. I think it's always got to be this kind of aspirational goal that every organization, every institution must have, that it's got to find a way to continue to diversify its makeup. Because why? Because it makes us all better. I mean, we're all striving to appreciate the wonderful differences that we all bring to any experience that we have. How do we make sure we're getting different perspectives, different experiences, different knowledge, different views? And so, no, I think everybody as a baseline has got to say that our ultimate objective is to make sure that we're continuing to increase diversity in all the things that we do. Uniquely in the energy space, we're at, I think, at an interesting time. And whether you listen to Elon Musk, whether you listen to Bill Gates, particularly in the power sector, there's this reality that we're going to see power demands increase by 40%, or some would say by 4 times by 2040. So there's this incredible need for power to keep these lights on. But as many of you participate in computing activities, whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it's quantum computing, whether it's all the GIS things that you do, all the TikToking, all the stuff that you're doing, all that requires what? Requires power. And so as more and more of that takes place, we're seeing there's an incredible increasing demand for power. And so we're seeing this all across our territory in terms of having to build more power plants, build more battery storage, build more solar, build more renewables to make sure we are keeping you reliable and resilient and safe, but also trying to make sure we balance it out to deal with affordability issues. So we're seeing this increase in demand, so we're going to be building more resources to meet this demand. And as we do that, yes, I've got to make sure, and we've got to make sure that, first of all, we're telling you about the reality of what's happening in our industry, but also saying, what does that mean from a workforce standpoint in terms of going to different places all across the country, whether it's historically black colleges and universities, whether it's just different parts of communities, to make sure they understand what the opportunities are. So yeah, it's an aggressive strategy around recruiting, not only in universities and college campuses and technical schools, but it's beginning around the 4th grade, just getting into the school systems at a much earlier fashion to say, this is what you can be, this is what you can do, and creating great excitement about it to say, okay, this is a place that's pretty cool to be. I mean, working in the power business is pretty cool. And so come join us, be a part of this journey. So that's a lot of things that I think about as we deal with this conversation.
How has your own professional background informed your decision-making around diversity?
Oh my heavens! I mean, one of the reasons I was excited about to do this because my professional career started on the Hill. I mean, I started on the Hill in 1979, working for a guy named Leon Panetta. And I came out of school and I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I loved politics and I loved what politics was all about. And the thing I love about the Hill and how that Hill experience has shaped me was that every day you come to work, you're trying to change something. And so as you do that, and whether it was law or not law, even if the law was there, you're still working to change it. And so you do that, and then the other part of it was you also have to be a good teammate and work with people and learn to collaborate across different parties and different issues, different people. And so a lot of those things I think have fundamentally served me well today in terms of as I do the job today. These are skills that I learned when I was working on the Hill. I was also fortunate and blessed. Panetta's office was right next to Bill Gray's office. And so I got to spend time with Bill Gray at a very formative early stage in my life. And so listening to guys like that, like Leon and Bill Gray and Julian Dixon and Mickey Leland, who became a dear friend of mine, and Harold Ford, some of those people, I mean, they were great inspirations to me about, the sky was the limit in terms of what I could do. Now, I never thought I would end up being the CEO of as we say, the largest power company in the country. There's one who may be a little bit bigger, but it's more of a renewable development organization than what we are. No, I never thought this was possible, but at the same time, I do think the things that you learn on the Hill, there are no limits. Nothing can hold you back because you're adaptable, you're flexible, you're a quick study, you learn to do things in many different ways. The other thing is the Hill teaches you how to work hard. I mean, because there's nothing short of working 14, 15, 16 hours a day, and you learn how to do third shift work. I mean, you learn how to work. And so there's no substitute, and no matter what you do, for working. And so, I outwork a lot of people. I mean, I just do, because we just work. And so, and then we build teams and we get results. And those are a lot of things how I think the early stages of my career, I think really informed me and kind of shaped me into, I think, what has been a part of my 30 plus year career at Southern Company.
Speaking of the Hill, what are you looking for Congress to do to improve the diversity in the energy workforce?
Congress got to do what Congress got to do. I look at the Congressional Black Caucus today and the numbers now that have grown since my days on the Hill in the late 70s, early 80s, and you look at just the overall diversity from Latinos to women to African Americans to other ethnic groups. I mean, it's just greater diversity there than it wasn't, and it continues to grow. I mean, you look at cases of redistricting and how the voting rights is being used to make sure there's proper representation. So I think all that helps support from a policy standpoint. But also, more importantly, I think in many places, like I grew up in South Alabama, so Alabama has, I guess, for the past couple of decades, has only had one African-American member of Congress. Now they're being challenged to draw a district that would be conducive for a second member. And so I think that aspires kids to say, I can go do that. I mean, they see role models other than what they otherwise traditionally would see. So I think inherently, as you see the diversification of Congress, I think that will then also flow down to policies and other institutions as well, because Congress will be leading by example.
And what has Southern Company specifically done to make its workforce more diverse?
We've done a lot of things. I mean, it's been a long-term commitment for this company. Like I said, I've been there some 30 plus years, and so diversity, I mean, we've been dealing with these issues before it was cool and fashionable. I mean, so this has been something we've been on this journey for a very, very long time. Yes, like many other institutions and organizations, we kind of redoubled, even restructured our focus after the killing of George Floyd, and to make sure that the work that we were doing, our commitment was not being viewed as episodic, and that it was not something that we're just going to do kind of 2 or 3 months after the death or killing of George Floyd, but it'd be something that we'll continue to do for now and forevermore. And so we put a structure in place that says our aspiration was moving to equity for everybody. And so, but the foundation of that was making sure we were listening and talking to each other and understanding each other. One of the stories I tell was that as we began to talk, and there was one group of individuals, some African American females were talking with some of their white colleagues, and they were sharing the example of kind of what mothers say to their black sons as they get of driving age, and they would talk about driving while black. And many of the white colleagues had no idea what that meant. And some of you, I'm sure most of you get it. Driving while black means you pull over by the cops. You don't talk, you don't do anything. You put your hands on the dashboard and just listen. And so many people didn't understand that reality. So we start with talking and listening and reflecting and having those stories. And then that would inform us about the work we needed to do. Whether it's more talent recruiting, whether it was more, redacting resumes where people couldn't tell your gender, your race, your ethnicity. A lot of different things that we focused on. Things like Propel Center, which we're developing with historically black colleges in terms of creating this kind of connectivity for science, technology, energy, and math, engineering and math work to make sure they have the best resources to fill jobs that are available in data science and data analytics and that kind of work. Making sure we're doing things in our communities around social justice, energy justice, and being very intentional and being very committed about those things. And then measuring the work that we do and then understanding the gaps, and then we start that all over again in the next year. But making sure that we're committed to do that work over the long haul is not just some episodic adventure that we're on, but we're on this long-term journey.
You talked a little bit about this, but besides your own workforce, what are you doing for the different communities you serve?
Oh my heavens! I mean, where do you start? I mean, if you know anything about our company, our motto is we're a citizen wherever we serve, and our goal is to make sure that our communities are better because we live and work there. And so we are so dedicated. We're so integral to all the communities that we're involved in terms of understanding their needs, making sure they're prepared for economic development, working with all the school systems, but also doing things like working in distressed communities. If you ever watch the Tour Championship, and we've been involved with the PGA Tour now for probably over 25 years, and there's this community called Eastlake where the tournaments take place. And so this community some 25 years ago had the highest crime rate zip code in the country and had the lowest graduation rate in the state of Georgia. Now 99.7% of the students graduate there's incredible housing appreciation. There are grocery stores there now. There are banks there now. There are all the things you want in a thriving community. And because of the small investment we made, and we levered that with a bunch of other organizations, other institutions, and so lives have been saved because of that kind of work. We replicate that kind of focus all across our territories. And like I said, I mean, whether it's co-chairing homeless initiatives to make sure that we're really addressing the homeless needs in a given community, and not just driving by a homeless person and trying to figure out, do I give them money or do I not, and trying to understand why they may be homeless, but let's make sure we get our hands dirty and understand what all the issues are, and we're doing things to address those issues, from additional affordable housing to what we call a continuum of care, making sure they've got resources to deal with their issues, bringing in the Veterans Administration to make sure that many of those homeless individuals are veterans, making sure they're getting the kind of support they need. So it's a wide range of things that we get involved in, and not just the commercial metro chamber activities, but doing the hard work, doing the tough work, doing the dirty work to make sure that all parts of our community are benefiting because we're there.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for your time, your insights, the work you're doing, and for being
My
here
pleasure,
tonight.
guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much to Joe and Mr. Chris Womack. And thanks again to Southern Company, our sponsor for this evening. I am so excited to now introduce our featured guest, Congressman Jim Clyburn, the Assistant Democratic Leader in the House of Representatives and a Democrat from South Carolina. Thank you so much, Congressman.
Thank you.
So we have a lot to unpack this evening, and I want to start off first. Just now, when we heard Mr. Womack speaking with Joe, he mentioned things like the murder of George Floyd. He mentioned about representation in Congress and how important those moments are. Why is it important for our energy and our industry, our workforce as a whole, to recognize the political and social forces at work to create a diverse workforce?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me, and thank you, Chris, for your friendship over the years. When I first met Chris some years ago on a golf course, he didn't know how to count. I noticed that he's been pretty successful with the Southern Company, so he finally learned how to count and get to the bottom line. So I want to congratulate him so much for that achievement. In addition, you mentioned at the outset that today only about 9% of African Americans are represented in the clean energy area, less than 30% of women. One of the things that we came into focus with the murder of George Floyd was the fact that there was a lot of intentionality in making these kinds of numbers. We hear talk all the time about Black Lives Matter, and a lot of people get a little nervous about that. Well, the fact of the matter is, all you have to do is look at that incident and others around it, some that followed it, and you'll know that in the many areas and in the minds of many people, Black lives do not matter. And if your life does not matter, then your livelihood is of no consequence to anybody's thought process. And so when you're looking at energy and the future, if you are interested in everybody's livelihood, then you got to start looking at ways for you to create pathways in the clean energy field in order to bring people in who are not ordinarily there. So if you had 9% now for African Americans, then you got to look at ways to get up to at least what I call equity. Now, I never argue for equality, I always argue for equity. 9%, in order for equity to be present, it should be at least 13%. So that's where I am.
Why is it that when we talk about an inclusive workforce, when we talk about the energy sector, why is that good for business and the planet, as well as for the workers?
Well, it seems to me that if you own a business, I grew up in a house. My father was a minister, but my mother was a college-educated beautician who took her degree and hung it on the wall of her beauty shop. And she kept on being the beautician. And when she passed away at a very early age of, she was only 55 when she passed away, she had 16 operators in 2 beauty shops. Now, it indicated to me that you have to look at the communities that you're serving, as she did. Because in addition to being a very successful beauty shop owner, she was the largest fundraiser for the NAACP in my hometown of Sumter. And one of the earliest NAACP cases in the South was a case called NAACP versus Nash. That was a case that grew out of the attempts on the part of southern states to break the backs of the NAACP by filing these lawsuits. And my mom's took it upon herself in that beauty shop to go out and raise the money that was necessary to fight that lawsuit. So she was demonstrating to me what it meant to live in that community. Not just for people to come to have their hair done, but she had to reflect a certain amount of citizenship in that community. And that's what corporations have to do. And I admire the Southern Company. I've been watching them for a long, long time now. They don't work in South Carolina, but if you take one step across the Georgia state line, you find them operating down there at the Vogel plant that I've had a little bit to do with. So I admire them for really going the extra mile in Georgia, in Alabama, Mississippi, to do the things that are necessary to prove corporate citizenship, good corporate citizenship.
I like that you brought up South Carolina. I love South Carolina. And I'm not just saying that, I promise. I think it's a beautiful state. My grandmother used to live in South Carolina.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah. I would go down to Myrtle Beach to see her every year. I miss
Oh,
it so
good,
much. I loved
good,
it.
good. A little bit outside of my district, but
Still a beautiful state. But another thing about South Carolina is that it has, I believe it's 8 HBCUs.
we do have 8 HBCUs, and 7 of them are in my district.
So talk to me a little bit about how you see HBCUs helping to make our energy and just corporate America in general the inclusive as it needs to be.
Let me answer that question by telling a little story. I'm known as a storyteller. Many of you have heard of Ron McNair. Ron McNair lost his life in the Challenger explosions. He was a very celebrated astronaut who, as many of you recall, on his first trip into space, he played his alto saxophone on a spaceship. Ron came from the little town of Lake City, South Carolina. It's a little tobacco town. When he was growing up, he was not allowed to use the library in that town. And Ron came by to visit with me just before going off on that fateful flight. He said to me on that day, well, he wasn't coming to Columbia to see me. He really was at the University of South Carolina, had just been offered a professorship, and this was going to be his last flight, and he was going on the staff of the University of South Carolina. Well, it was a fateful flight. Ron said to me on that day, he said, you know, everywhere I go, people introduce me as this astronaut who earned a PhD in physics from MIT. But that's not what made me successful. He said, what made me was those years I spent on the campus of North Carolina A&T. When I got there, having been denied education, a proper education in the little town of Lake City, was not able to use the library, those teachers and those professors with similar backgrounds and experiences understood who and what I was. And the remediation I got from them is what allowed me to earn my PhD in physics from MIT. He explained to me what a lot of people seem not to understand. If you take black girls and boys off of the sea islands of North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, and allow them to get their footing in these small classrooms, being taught by teachers, professors with similar backgrounds and experiences, it makes a difference. And that, to me, is what I think has made the Southern Company so successful and other companies like it. Others are doing the same thing these days. I now interact a whole lot with Dominion Energy, with Duke Energy. They're all participating with HBCUs in South Carolina. South Carolina State University, my alma mater, is the only HBCU in the country that offers an accredited degree in nuclear engineering. And quite frankly, South Carolina, 54% of our energy comes from nuclear. And I know there's been some issues in the past, but if we are going to do the things that Chris says need to be done to meet our energy needs going forward, we are going to have to get serious about an all-of-the-above approach to energy. It's going to be renewables, but quite frankly, and some of my friends get nervous when I say it, but nuclear has got to be in the mix.
How do you see, or what do you see as the government's role in building this inclusive workforce in our clean energy sector?
Well, I think the government is, especially under, nobody will be surprised to hear me say this, under the Biden-Harris administration, is doing a great job. We've just invested $7 billion, that administration, in HBCUs. They're investing in 3 HBCUs in South Carolina. If my memory serves, it's South Carolina State, Claflin, and Denmark Technical College. And let me say something about that. When we talk about energy, the first thing we think about, these lights in here. You don't need a 4-year liberal arts degree to learn how to be an electrician. And that's why we've been insisting upon these 2-year colleges, like Denmark Technical College, be a part of these kinds of initiatives. I want those students at South Carolina State majoring in nuclear engineering, where they've had 100% placement over the last 4 years. I want them to get their 4-year degrees, but I also want those people who want to be electricians, whose parents may have been electricians. That's what they want to do. So we ought not stigmatize. So that I think that the government, and that's why Joe Biden, when he was campaigning, a lot of people didn't catch what he was saying. He kept saying that he wanted 2-year colleges, community colleges, to get as much benefit from the government as these 4-year liberal arts institutions. He said that throughout his whole campaign. Nobody focused on it. I think that people just thought about community college. He wasn't talking about just community college. these technical schools, these vocational schools, these things that allow people who don't want to be liberally educated, just want to be plumbers, electricians, these kinds of things. That's what energy is all about. And so I think that the government has a big job in trying to, first of all, destigmatize education, demonstrate that education is much more, much broader than a 4-year liberal arts education, as people seem to think. That's what this has got to be about, especially when it comes to energy. You know, I often tell the story about Thomas Edison, that many of us call the greatest inventor of all times. Well, that may be true. And we give him that credit because we think that his light bulb is what changed the world. But the fact of the matter is, Thomas Edison couldn't get his light bulb to work until he sat down with Louis Latimer, the son of former slaves. A black guy up in Massachusetts gave Edison the filament that he needed to make his light bulb work. And so Thomas Edison, the white guy, stepping outside of his comfort zone, sitting down with Louis Latimer, the black guy, who stepped outside of his comfort zone, and together they lit the world. And so the government has got to be sure that we do the things that are necessary. When I tell this story to most high schools and colleges and universities around, they never heard of Louis Latimer. And they look at me sometimes like I'm crazy. And I'm not going to say anything here today, but I suspect there are a few people here who never heard of Louis Latimer. But for Louis Latimer, there wouldn't have not have been Thomas Edison when it came to the light bulb.
Congressman, I have one final question for you. After everything that we have discussed this evening, do you think it is possible in our lifetime that we will see our clean energy industry embrace that diversity, embrace that inclusivity that we talked about tonight?
Yes, I do. And maybe I'm just a born optimist. But when I see my mother come from the cotton fields of Lee County, South Carolina, and become a very astute, well-accomplished businesswoman who took breaks between heads to go to college. She went to college while running her beauty shops. When I see my father being denied a high school education, I'm writing a book now about the first 8. I call it the first 8. These are the 8 African Americans that served in Congress from South Carolina before me. I'm finished the book. The publishers ain't finished with me, but we're still doing some stuff. But I write about this, and I point this out because in this book I talk about the fact that in South Carolina, right up until 1940, no high school was provided for blacks except in 3 cities: Columbia, Booker T. Washington, Charleston, Burke High School, and there was a high school up in Greenville, Sterling. Other than that, you couldn't go to high school if you were black. Stopped at the 7th grade. My father grew up that way. Could not get a high school education. But he taught himself. And he went out and he thought he was ready. He took a college entrance exam and passed it and got admitted to college. But when he got to his senior year, they called him into the office and said, now you cannot come back until you bring us your diploma, your high school diploma, because state law would not allow us to give you a college degree until you produce a high school diploma. He couldn't produce one because he didn't have it. So he never finished college. He was dead 20 years before the college awarded him his degree. Now, when I see that, my own parents, then I know what can be done. What we have to do is develop the will. Develop the will. Our high schools are there. They do the best that they can. Our colleges do what they can with what they've got. Our governments at the state and federal levels have got to do what is necessary to make sure. I don't know a whole lot about this young lady that you're going to hear from later, but I know that she was a National Teacher of the Year. I know that. And I know a little more about the challenges of her background that she overcame to do that. So if my parents could do it, and she's much younger than I am, and she's doing it, we can do it. All we got to do is develop the will to do it. And that's why I really admire what's going on with this administration now. They have the will, and we are creating the way to get this done.
Congressman, thank you so much for your time this evening. And again, thank you so much to our sponsor, Southern Company, for helping facilitate this discussion tonight. That does bring us to the end of our program. Thank you all for attending this evening.